Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anza Saqib and welcome to yet another episode of Rendezvous with Anza Saqib on CXO Global TV. CXO Global is a knowledge-sharing platform for all C-levels across the globe and in Pakistan. We're trying to contribute to the knowledge economy. And every time we have a very special guest with us who has spent a considerable amount of time in the corporate field and has a lot to share with us. Today as well, we've got Mr. Athar Imran Nawaz. He's the CEO of Cybrid Technologies, as well as the venture partner in Laxon's Venture Capital Fund. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Sir, we were going through your LinkedIn profile and wow, what a journey. And I met you in person. You're someone that's extremely humble. But we would also like to hear about where this journey started. So where you went to school, what courses you studied, how did you end up where you are right now?
Thank you, Anza. Thank you to CXO Global for having me here. It's a great honor. It's an excellent platform. We need such platforms. My journey has been not that complicated. It's very diverse because my father was in army, so we used to move around a lot. So in fact, by the time I went to my master's, which was in Purdue University, US, that was my 13th educational institute.
Oh, wow.
So I changed practically every year. I've studied Islamiyat in English and I've studied maths and Urdu. So I went all over Pakistan, from Landi Kotal to Sialkot to Rahim Yar Khan to Quetta. I did my FSc from the Fauji Foundation College in Pindi. Then I went to GIK Institute. So that's where I spent my 4 years doing bachelor's in computer science. That was one of the most memorable experiences, I would say. So I graduated, I got a gold medal also. And then I worked for a couple of years and then went again for my master's to Purdue University. And interestingly, I found out that Purdue was the first computer science department ever established in the history, and that was 1964. And I was wondering where did the professors came from, and they were actually from the maths department, I found out. So that is, where actually a lot of people who made the internet, they were the professors and researchers there. So, it was all a computer science journey. Then I joined a couple of organizations which were really, large back office support for US companies. Because as soon as I finished my master's, on the 10th day of my graduation, I came back. So I didn't stay in US, I didn't work there. I came back, I just settled down here. So I worked in 2 large organizations before the current one. Generally on the 10th year of my graduation, I turned more towards a management kind of portfolio because I loved managing people. That's where I thought was the scale. And then finally, joined Laxon Group. Cybrid is a fully owned entity of Laxon Group in 2014. So I've been with them for 7 years, work as a CEO of the company and also do a lot of other ventures inside the Laxon Group.
Brilliant. So you spoke about corporate management and how you love managing people. It is something that's very interesting because someone who comes from a computer science background and that human effect that's there. What does corporate leadership mean to you? Because you've seen it all, you've done it all.
So there is a very interesting insight that I got that people who do well in academics, sometimes they don't do well in professional life. Because if you do well in your bachelor's or master's, it's generally an individual effort, right? People support, but at the end it's your own thing. It's not really a team effort in that sense. And then when you join an organization, because you're good technically in whatever field you graduated, you do well in your starting phase because you are an individual contributor. But there is a point where you have to make a transition, and that point is very implicit. Whether you learn to work in teams, whether you manage relationships, whether you use influence through your relationships and your personality rather than just through your technical capabilities. And I think a lot of people miss that out. And individual contributors who do well miss that out more because they have shined so far in their careers through their thing. So I think at that point I learned it's all about people.
And interpersonal skills.
Interpersonal skills. So when you say it's all about people, then it means that it is you working with people, you're growing them. I learned that the higher you grow, the more role power that you get, the more diplomatic and the more engaging you have to become. So it's actually the other way around.
Oh,
and we're not in an industrial age anymore where it's a factory setup, where it's a creative knowledge work society, as you yourself said in the start. And that's only can work in a social collaborative effort. So I think that is where I learned that it's important to focus on people and get the people to do what you want to do. So corporate leadership, coming to your question, is at any level, not just the CEO, at any level, is about how you can integrate your team, how you can make them align with your vision, and how you can really grow them and harness their creative capabilities. That's at the end of the day the most important thing. If you look at any top leader, the most important thing that they have done is that they are focused on people, they have developed people, they have retained people, and they have made them do the creative work rather than a top-down, a hierarchical push that used to happen in the industrial society. I think a lot of it is we as a society are learning. A lot of it we are not, because at the end of the day we are a very conservative, socially respectful society. So the person who is the boss or the leader or the elder in the family cannot be talked back to or cannot be debated. But that's something that has to change in a corporate leadership. So I think any success that any CEO in Pakistan must have had is because they've done well with the thing. So I think it's about, and also what, as you grow, the corporate leadership is what you are not supposed to do anymore. So that's a very important point, because there's a lot of CEOs are doing the work of a COO, as the Chief Operating Officer. They're still micromanaging or they don't want to let go of things. They don't want to delegate, and then that then translates back in your people don't get or take up the ownership. I think that is one of the most important lessons that I have learned, that corporate leadership as you grow is about letting go, and you do things only that you can do.
I read something very, very interesting this morning, and it was just a quote that I read online, and it said, "There are no bad students, but only bad teachers. There are no bad employees, but only bad bosses." How far do you agree with this?
Absolutely. Peter Drucker, one of the management guru, he said, when you put somebody in a place and that person fails, it's not his fault. It's the fault of the person who has put him or her there. Right? So I think it is absolutely important about how you work with people. At the end of the day, to sum it up, it's all the things that you do around people.
Yeah, absolutely. What a beautiful thought. So I would like to touch upon the fact that you have been working in Pakistan for such a long time. You have literally seen the evolution of the IT sector in particular. We've moved from a lot of brick and mortar practices to a lot of new digital technologies, disruptive technologies that we've adopted. There is a trend which is moving towards e-commerce, and I know you have been involved in that sector as well. What do you think about such disruptive technologies for Pakistan? Is there potential? And when you talk about e-commerce in particular, there is also a lack of digital trust that's there.
We'll use e-commerce as an example, but let's say which time period are we working in, right? This is an era in which there is massive change happening, and COVID has just expedited that change, right? Had you been living these 20, 30 years of working life, had it been 40 years earlier, they would not have, things may not have moved as they are moving right now. The internet, the access to connectivity, the digital transformation that is happening within the organizations, the ability to do so much that any person can come up and become an entrepreneur. You don't require a large industrial setup to do that. So it's a very, very important thing, so that any IT organization, or for that matter, any organization that is in this time period is doing something which is not done before. It's a very, very fast changing thing. Pakistan, there's a concept called lag effect, where you are relative to somebody else. So our lag effect from a technological point of view from US is, let's say, more. From Indonesia or Malaysia is relatively less. So you can always compare that. Maybe if it's 5 years with Indonesia, that is, after 5 years we would be where they are today. It's just an approximation things. So I think we are in a very, very interesting time. The technology companies, and especially companies like ours, which is part of a large group. We are a large old company. We're in operation for about 13 years. We are fairly spread out. I think the large organizations really have a lot to do in leveraging the disruptive technologies and the startups. So I think over a period of time, we are harnessing all of that, but all adopting these, what to call, disruptive technologies like AI, machine learning, big data. It requires a certain infrastructure and a baseline, right? So if you want to run a high-powered electronic device in your home, you need electricity, right? You need certain base infrastructure to do that. And I think that is something that is improving. That base infrastructure is the physical infrastructure, it's the regulatory infrastructure. I think we are coming up well in the last 10 years, I would say, especially the last 5-6 years. We have done well as far as the trends go. E-commerce, you asked, we'll take this one of it, that is an example. Actually, e-commerce is not that new. So our group, the Lakson Group, owns McDonald's in Pakistan, and you have been ordering McDonald's at home for about 10 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's, in one way, is e-commerce. It's just like you're not getting something, you're just getting something to eat, but at the end you call or you book an order through some channel.
Or the app now.
Or now the app. Yeah. So we've been doing it for about 11 years, McDonald's. So I think now, especially with the COVID, it's just accelerated, but it was on the path of increase anyway. The digital infrastructures like the Instagram and the Facebook and platforms like Shopify and Magento, they've made the barrier to entry much lower. So anybody can come up and if they have. But in e-commerce, we have to understand it that really, in my opinion, it's not really as much about technology as it's about the supply chain. Whether you have the right products coming in at the right time, your vendors are supplying to you in the right way, and whether you have a good distribution network. The other key component that we are missing, I think things are happening on that side, is payments. It's quickly and easily pay.
Like payment gateways.
Yeah, the 70% of the e-commerce transactions are still cash on delivery, which is okay, but it's not the right platform. So it's most important is that as e-commerce is destined to grow, the e-commerce companies have a responsibility to bring trust into the system. I think it will come because this is a trend that cannot go away. It's just
so
that,
how do we end up building that trust? Because
I think it's just good, honest service from the e-commerce companies. That's all there is to it. And I think the players who are the larger players have the most responsibility. If they do well, then they set a benchmark that the others will have to follow. And I think we're getting to that point. We invested in an e-commerce setup called Shopsy, Shopsy.pk.
Shopsy.pk.
Yeah, it's a search engine. So it aggregates. So you don't have to go to other stores. About 250 stores, and it aggregates about 5 million products.
Brilliant.
In one way. So you go and search for, let's say, iPhone 12.
Okay.
So. And it will show all the iPhone 12 that are available in all the e-commerce stores in Pakistan. So you can do a price comparison, you can do a spec comparison, and now we're getting to a point where you can actually order from there.
Oh, that's amazing.
But it's an aggregator, so there is no logistics, there is nothing that we do ourselves. It's just an aggregator. So I think those things are coming, and we really wanted to get into that space.
Yeah.
And it's an excellent platform. The search is absolutely fantastic. It's
now that you mentioned something that's disruptive, we also have been hearing about drop shipping. Since you mentioned logistics and aggregators, do you think there's potential for that in Pakistan?
See, there are three things that an e-commerce setup would always need. One is the technology part, the other is the logistics, and the third is the payment. All three will continuously improve. So the logistics are going to improve. Just to give you an example, there are specialized e-commerce delivery and logistics players that are coming up, rather than the standard ones like the TCS and the Leopard. They also are focused on e-commerce, but they would find something of a logistics player that just does the delivery for e-commerce. and that optimizes the whole process, right? So I think all of these downstream innovations will always happen once there is demand, and there is demand, and there is innovation that is happening, and there are a lot of livelihoods that are now connected with e-commerce, and I believe that with COVID and all the things that we learned from COVID, e-commerce is here to stay and improve, and now there is even regulation and policies that are developed at the government level to support e-commerce. So I think that's going to happen.
Brilliant. So speaking of government policies, we all know that recently the Prime Minister Imran Khan announced special technology zones in Pakistan. Do you think, on a very personal level, your opinion, do you think this will create the right kind of conducive environment for new businesses to set up and really speed up our technological advancements?
So I think it will, because the clusters are always helpful. You put all the things that are similar together, and they benefit from each other, and they leverage the benefits that the government gives, or it's whatever. So there have been special economic zones that have been in effect for a very long time. I think about 30-40 years they've been there. There are about 20 odd economic special SEZs that are already there. I think the idea of STZ is a very simple one. In my opinion, it should have been done 10 years ago.
Absolutely, I agree.
What it does is that it simply says, okay, you can create this cluster, you can create this simplified thing where you can give benefits to all the companies that come there. You come work in a private-public partnership model, and then it's easier for all the vendors to come in and work with similar clients in one place. So it has benefits. The key is always, as in life, is in execution, right? So I think the first part, which is the necessary part, is the policy framework, but it's necessary but not sufficient. I think the key is in execution. I think as long as we think in the right model that any small place can be designated as an STZ, you don't require acres of space, and you provide the facilities alongside. I think if the execution is well, it will greatly affect the
overall outcome. Inshallah. I was reading one of your papers. You've published one on agile practices.
Time back.
Yeah, a long time back. Do you remember a little about it? Because agile and Scrum are concepts that are still new to Pakistan.
Right. So I am a certified Scrum Master also, back in, 15 years ago. And I used to work in a company where we were in a globally distributed Scrum. And I was a Scrum Master, and our office was next to Marriott, Islamabad, and there was if you remember, there was a massive blast in Marriott in 2008.
Absolutely.
And we were just 10 days from our release. That was a very critical release. Pakistan was already on a high-risk area that were affecting the growth of the companies. So we were in Scrum, and I think Scrum helped us despite all that fiasco, helped us to deliver what we had to deliver anyway, despite that disaster. And so my first boss, Dr. Imran, who was a researcher, and he's he used to do research on Scrum at that time. So he said, this is a one-off event, and you were in a Scrum team, and that Scrum team delivered. So why don't we do research as a industry and academia and together, because you have insights into what happened, and he has that research framework that whether it helped or not. So I think what we came up with is that, and that paper was accepted in an IBM conference, and I went to Canada to deliver that, was that if you follow that project management framework properly, that will really help you go through a very difficult situation, because you cannot do a historical evaluation, because events like that don't happen. It's what we used to call an N is equal to one event, right? So we learned from the empirical evidence that we had, and I think that we clarified. So I think that's a very good example of how the two, industry academia, can work together to come up with good research, practical research. And then I think it helped us that if we did the right things, I think overall it helped us. So just final thought on this, that whenever something goes wrong in my company, I always ask whether it's a process gap or it's an execution gap, whether we did not structure it right or whether we did not execute it right. So I think
it's definitely food for thought.
So I think in this we did that. So I think that was, and that paper is still the, and probably will remain the only paper I'll ever write in my life, but I think it was useful.
Yeah, but this really hits close to home, because I know a lot of businesses in Pakistan suffered heavy losses. I mean, last year was just a very big learning experience for all of us. Some businesses suffered heavy losses, others made massive gains. I mean, their sales skyrocketed. But either way, one common factor was that we all had a learning curve. Yep. So what did you personally experience during the pandemic?
So it's very interesting you bring up this question, because a lot of what I learned in that 2008 situation, I applied to the COVID situation. Because although, that was not a one-off event, but still, I mean, there were similarities, that there was a disaster and how an organization would learn from it. So I'll talk about this first and then the general overall COVID thing. So the first thing that we learned is that the first few hours or days after anything hits you, anything bad hits you, are the most critical. How you react to it and how you position yourself in that is the most important element. So I remember when, March, similar time period last year, one thing that we all sat together, the entire management, because we are about 1,400 people, we are about 5 cities, and our operations are 24/7, 365. It's not that we can ask people to just go home and work from there. It was there's just too many logistic and compliance requirements for us that cannot happen, right? So we sat down and I said the first thing that we all agree is that the operations and the commitments to clients will not suffer. That's our starting point. So we just position ourselves there, unless and until there is a very immediate health hazard to our colleagues. So that position everybody, I joked somebody and said, nobody is allowed to get sick unless it is approved by me. But I think that positioned everybody in the right framework, and the team responded. I mean, it's not easy because they went out of their way, and none of our operations got a hit. In fact, and I come to the second part, that how COVID impacted. So it depends on which sector you are in. I think that's a very important starting differentiation. If you are in a hotel industry or tourism industry or the airline industry, you will get a hit, right? Because your business is. I think from a technology sector point of view, I think this is something that is in the medium and long term an opportunity. In short term, everybody will get hit. I think the larger organizations like us have more responsibility because they can survive the COVID thing in a better way as compared to a very early stage startup which doesn't have good cash flows. So I think COVID cannot be used as an excuse for any technology company. So it's not that you succeeded despite COVID. I think we have to succeed, and I think generally all tech companies that you see in Pakistan, generally they've done well.
They've done well.
And it's because there are a lot of opportunities that are coming up. Everybody is expediting their digital transformation because of the economic hit that we are getting in the US and Europe. A lot of work is getting outsourced again to Pakistan.
Absolutely.
So I think it's for us to really think differently, think big, invest, grow people, and there is no reason why this cannot, we cannot succeed in that.
Absolutely, and what a wonderful thought. Think differently, invest in people and grow. Lastly, I would like to ask you about how has being a part of CXO Global impacted your personal and professional life?
So I think there is, and I'll relate that to my experience at Open Islamabad, because we and a few other, we started Open Islamabad back in 2014. So Open is an organization of Pakistani entrepreneurs. It's a global framework, a global network of the largest global network of Pakistani professionals. And we thought that we don't have that platform in Islamabad where we can get all the professionals and the entrepreneurs together and provide them a networking opportunity. So it was much larger. CXO is very focused on the ring, but I just wanted to, I can understand the importance of a platform. especially a platform that connects people. Because when you connect people, then things happen. They learn. A lot of times we learned that through our networking events of Open Islamabad, people got jobs, business relationships were initiated, JVs were done, and I think that's the two aspects. One is the learning part, and the other is the bubbling up of the opportunities. So I think it has impacted. You guys are doing a very good work, and I think it's becoming a platform that is becoming stronger as more and more people are joining, and I think there is a need for such platforms everywhere, because they can do a lot of thinking and a lot of alignment that is needed at the top. And relating to my company, because Cybrid, which is we are very heavily focused, and if I may add one point, that is the larger organizations that really need to push innovation, right? Because they have the muscle and they have the learning, but they cannot do it themselves. So they cannot do it through their standard operating systems. They'll have to work with startups. They'll have to work with other partners. And I think where we need that kind of, so we have a Corp Dev, which is a corporate development department, which thinks what new things should be done, where we should be in 3 to 5 years. And most of my time as a CEO is spent on that. And I think forums like CXO can really help us, because CEO is a pretty lonely place to be. And you need that advice network, that mentorship. We also need mentorship. In fact, we need it more than others, because if we mess up, more things go wrong. And there are certain things that as a CEO you're always doing which you are never trained to, which you are never exposed to. So you'll always have to be
firefighting,
learning, doing new things. I think so. It is platforms like these and networks like these that will always help a CEO or a CXO, for that matter, do his or her job in a better way. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and we at Cybrid really appreciate it. We, as we grow, we would really want to deepen that partnership to see, where our other CXOs can also benefit from it.
Definitely. What a beautiful thought. Thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute honor. There was a lot that I learned, and I'm sure the audience will learn a lot as well. Ladies and gentlemen, like I always say, together everyone achieves more. And today Mr. Athar Imran Nawaz has stressed upon that fact, and that is the essence of CXO Global Network, bringing people together so we can contribute to the knowledge economy. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see you all next time with another very special guest. Thank you.